Welcome back to Diligent Canine. Thanks for your support on Patreon. And today I'm going to talk about programming your dog's training schedule. So that is how long, how often, things of that nature. And in the beginning stages, you should be focused on small and frequent training intervals. And the more simple, the more critical the behavior, the more that is true. So when we talk about the behavior management stage of training, that stuff should be done constantly throughout the day, many times a day, but for a very short duration. The reason for that is that it builds stronger memories. This is also true for humans. So if you or I were to try to spend 3 hours just binge studying for a test tomorrow, our chances of success are much lower than if we had spent 15 or 20 minutes every day this week studying for that exam. So when we apply that to dog training, you might practice for 10 sessions throughout the day, but those sessions might only be 2 or 3 minutes each. And that seems like kind of a lot, but your dog will learn much better in those broken up intervals than trying to do something for 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Your dog needs to build up that sort of mental and depending on what your training is, physical endurance. So how do we structure that? Well, the way that I do it is I look at the things that I'm going to do most regularly for my dog, and that is take them to the bathroom and feed them. So if you think about how many times your dog goes outside to relieve themselves in the day, probably about 4 or so, and then you probably feed them 2 or 3 times a day. So right there are 6 intervals, and even if I missed one of those, let's just go with 5. Okay, so if you break that up into a couple minutes before and after every time the dog either eats or goes out to the bathroom, you do a little training with it. This isn't that complicated when you think about it. It does take some planning though. So what it looks like in your day-to-day application might be grabbing a handful of food out of their bowl, or if you have their daily allotment of food in a large container on a shelf, you take a handful out, and before the dog goes outside to go to the bathroom, you do a few sit repetitions. Same thing before the dog is allowed to come back inside. Same thing before it's given a whole bowl of food. That's another thing that is really important. I'll cover in a Q&A later because some people have asked, is what type of rewards to use, or the quality of the rewards, the dog's not taking treats, things like that. But like I said, I'll cover that at a later date. So when your training is broken up into those small intervals, your dog learns better, and it's a little easier for you actually. It does take planning, like I said though. When you get to more complex or complicated tasks, you will need time to set things up. If you're doing things like agility or protection or detection or tracking work, any of those things, you will probably have to drive to a field or an area where you can perform that training. You'll have to spend some time setting it up, and then you'll have to spend some time actually training, then doing all of that in reverse, tearing down, driving back home, all that. So you might only be able to do that a few times a week, if it's like a 2 or 3 hour process to go to the park or what have you, to your training field. But your dog still needs to stay active throughout the week. So finding a way to engage or train your dog or work training into little small bits throughout your day is absolutely critical. Your dog doesn't stop needing exercise or wanting engagement and training just because you're tired or sick or had a bad day or it's raining. So you really got to use some kind of critical thinking, some problem solving skills to plan out what your daily life is going to look like with your dog and how your training intervals are broken up. I find that it works best for me if I plan a 7-day schedule, and it's my training times for my dog Dean are like 3 15 or 20 minute sessions throughout the day, and I do that every single day of the week, but I might vary the task that I do on that day, so changes things up, keeps it a little interesting. might do detection one day, obedience another, and bite work every 5th day or once a week, a couple times a week, something like that. And we might go to the park once a week. So that's that. Thanks again for watching and for your support on Patreon.